the world's writers will walk through those gates. And if you hang around, you get a chance to talk to them.
I'm interested in conversations that deal with things that matter, but real, how do we live our lives?
First of all, make climate change personal in your life. The second step is get angry and get active. And the third step, and believe it or not, I think this is the most important. We have to imagine this world that we want to hurry towards.
It's about kindness is looking at people as people and not as I voted this, I do this, whatever it is. There are some people we will never get along with, but most of us are a complex mass of different things.
Hello, I'm Julia Donaldson. Some of you might know me from some of the books I've written, such as The Gruffalo or What the Ladybird Heard. Well, one of the things that I really love normally about coming to the Edinburgh International Book Festival is meeting children who love to read and bringing my stories to life for them on the stage. This year, of course, none of the authors or illustrators can do that. But I am delighted that this year's online book festival is available and free to so many children in so many different places. So I hope that anyone watching has a wonderful time and that it makes you want to read lots and lots of books.
Hello and welcome to Edinburgh International Book Festival and Get Adventurous with Lily Dew and Helen Skelton, sponsored by Baillie Gifford. I'm Nadine Aisha-Jasser and I'm going to be your host for today. It's what is going to be a lovely afternoon of talking about adventure and excitement with two women who have been all over the world and coming back to tell us their stories. Lily Dew is the author of fantastic female adventures and Earth Heroes, and Helen Skelton, BBC presenter and author of Wild Girl, stories of girls how to have incredible outdoor adventures. I'm so excited to have you both here, and you're both looking amazing in your Zoom rooms. Welcome, welcome.
Hi.
I wanted to kick us off before we go into our presentation and to say hello to our lovely audience who are watching us from home. If you could tell us a wee bit about where you're zooming in from, Helen and Lily, and if you could also maybe say a wee bit about what adventure means to you. And maybe at home, if you have a think about as well, what does adventure mean to you too? If we start with Helen.
Well, I am in my children's toy room in Leeds. People always mention the cat wallpaper, but this was kind of to get the kids excited because I'm always telling them stories of wild and wonderful beasts. So that's what that is. I'm in sunny Leeds at the minute. We'll probably be in the Lake District tomorrow. And what does adventure mean to me? For me, it's all about not having a plan and not sticking to any rules and not worrying about what you're meant to be doing and going after what you want to do. So if it's raining and you want to wade in the stream to your knees, then do it. That for me is what adventure is about. And I try and get a little bit of it in every day. Even if it's just having a different kind of sandwich, that can be an adventure, just doing something a little bit different.
That sounds amazing, Helen. Thank you so much. What about you, Lily? What's adventure mean to you and where are you coming in from?
Hi everyone, so I'm zooming in from my study where I write my stories in the Brecon Beacons of South Wales. And to me, adventure means going exploring and discovering new things and new places. And very often I think it means doing something that's scary, but being brave and having a go and giving it a try and seeing how you get on anyhow. So that's what adventure means to me.
Oh, that's amazing. I feel like as well, reading both of your books, there were totally moments when I'm reading them thinking, gosh, that must have been so scary with all the different things that you've done and also the women that you write about. And yet this real message of being brave definitely comes through. So thank you. I'm really excited for everything Helen and Lily are going to share with you as the audience today. The format of our event, just so you know what to expect, is we're going to have a presentation from Lily, and I've seen it, it's amazing, with lots of wonderful images telling you all about her books and her adventures. And then after Lily, we're going to have a wee presentation from Helen, where she's going to show you some amazing things too from all the different places that she's been. So it's going to be great. Hopefully you'll feel like through your laptops or your TV screens that you're on your adventure with us. And we're really looking forward to having you and to sharing with you. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Lily, and then she's going to present for us for a wee bit. So, Lily Dew is a freelance journalist and author with a passion for the outdoors, wild places, and nature. Her adventures have seen her cycling on the loftiest road of the Himalayas, running across England, Scotland, and Wales, and also around Manaslu, the 8th highest mountain in the world. She's written widely for magazines and journals, and she's the author of Fast Packing, Multi-Day Run Adventures, and Brecon Beacons Trails Running. Her books for children include Fantastic Female Adventures, which you can see, I've got my copy here, and Earth Heroes, inspirational stories about people like Greta Thunberg who are changing the world. I absolutely loved Lily's stories, and I felt like this could be an easy bedtime story that would make me feel inspired when I go to sleep and make me want to change the world in the morning. So passing over to Lily, who's going to do her presentation for us.
Thank you, Nadine. Hi, everyone. So for the next 15 minutes, I'm going to tell you about some of the amazing women in my book and their incredible adventures around the world. So firstly, I'm going to talk about swimming adventures. Now, I'm sure lots of you watching today love swimming. And one of the adventurers in my book is a long distance ocean swimmer. And I'm going to tell you all about her, but I thought we could have a fun quiz first. So I'm going to show you photos of some of the women in my book when they were little girls, and you've got to guess which of them grew up to be the long distance ocean swimmer. So here we go. First, we've got Beth. She likes climbing trees, ponies, dens, and playing in streams. And when she grows up, she wants to be a writer or work with horses. And secondly, here's Karen. She likes sledging, cycling, secret club with her friends, and she loves baked beans so much her friends bring them to her for Christmas and birthday presents. And she wants to be a professional cyclist when she grows up. And last of all, we've got Tori. She likes helping on her mum and dad's farm, sport, brownies, music, and singing in the choir. And she wants to be a newsreader when she grows up. So I'm going to give you 5 seconds, see if you can guess which of them grew up to be the long distance swimmer. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Right, the answer is Beth. This is Beth French. Now, Beth has loved the water since she was a little baby. There she is in a bucket. Now, if you'd known her when she was a little girl, you'd be really surprised that she grew up to be an ocean swimmer. That's because when she was 10 years old, she became ill with glandular fever, and it made her very poorly throughout her teenage years with something called ME and chronic fatigue syndrome. She was off school a lot, and at 17, she had to use a wheelchair and she had to leave school and she couldn't finish her studies. Now, she really missed her sports and especially her swimming. So she promised herself if she ever got better, she would swim all the way from England to France across the Channel. Now, happily, she did get better. And in her 20s, she spent a lot of time working all around the world and living all overseas. And by the time she was 30, she was back in England and she had a young son called Dylan. Now, Dylan has autism, so Beth has to homeschool him. And I'm sure lots of you know about homeschooling, don't you, after these last few months? Now, Beth wanted to show Dylan that he could grow up and follow his dreams. So she decided to do the thing that she'd been dreaming about, which was swim across the English Channel. So after months and months of training, here with Dylan on tow, in July 2012, Beth swam across the English Channel. Now, the English Channel is one of the busiest shipping lanes in the whole world, but Beth successfully completed that swim in 15 hours. And she loved her swimming adventure so much, she decided to look for something even bigger, and she found something called the Ocean 7 Challenge, which is doing 7 swims like the English Channel swim in different places around the world. And at that time, when she heard about it, only 5 people had done all 7 swims, and no one had ever done them in 12 months. So she decided to make that her challenge. And because she was homeschooling Dylan, she could take him along for the adventure. And there was a film crew who wanted to make a movie about her swims, so they were willing to help pay for all the cost. But it still took her another 4 years to raise all the money and do all the swimming preparation. But in autumn 2016, she started her Ocean 7 Challenge with a Catalina Channel swim, which took her 19 hours. And then after that, she went that December to Hawaii to swim the Molokai Channel between 2 Hawaiian islands, 26 miles. That's the same distance as a marathon. And she had to start this swim at night time so that she could finish in daylight. But in the nighttime, she had an unexpected visitor in the water. It was a man-eating tiger shark. But Beth had read that if you meet a shark whilst you're swimming in the water, you need to make sure that you don't look like a fish so that it won't want to eat you. So she made herself upright by treading water, and eventually the shark swam away. But she thankfully finished that swim in 18 hours, despite being stung on the face by a jellyfish just before the finish. Now, after 4 swims, Beth was on target to break the record and finish them all in 1 year. But Dylan, who was accompanying her on the trip, was finding it really, really difficult when Beth was being taken away from him to be filmed for the movie, and it was making him really upset and anxious. So after 5 swims, Beth decided to pull out of her Ocean 7 Challenge. She'd started the swims to show Dylan that anything is possible if you put your mind to it, but she stopped them to show him that there's nothing more important to her in the world than him. And despite not finishing all 7 swims, the film crew still made a movie about her adventure, and you can download that on the internet and watch it at home. It's called Against the Tides. So I hope you enjoyed hearing about Beth and her swimming adventures, but what about those other girls we saw at the beginning? So this is Tori, and Tori James is the first Welsh woman to climb Mount Everest, the highest mountain in the world. And here's a picture from her story in the book of her crossing a huge crevasse, a crack in the ice, on her way up the mountain. And this adventurer is Karen Dark. And she did grow up to be a professional cyclist, but she doesn't use a bicycle using her legs. She uses a hand bike, which she powers just with her arms. And that's because at 21, unfortunately, she fell in a climbing accident and she's actually paralyzed from the chest downwards. But that hasn't stopped her having lots of adventures. She has kayaked from Canada to Alaska. She still goes rock climbing using her arms only. She has crossed Greenland on special sit-down skis, and she's won a gold medal racing her hand bike in the Olympic Games. But what she loves best of all is going on big hand biking adventures with her friends. And here's a picture from her story in the book when she was following the Great Silk Road from Kyrgyzstan to China. Now, I'm going to tell you about two more of the women whose stories are in my book, but I thought we could do another quick quiz. So you've got to guess what adventure both these women have done. So let me introduce you to Misbah and Anne from the book. And they both, like Helen Skelton, kayaked down the Amazon? Have they raced over mountains in the Himalaya? Or have they both skied to the North Pole? So 5 seconds again, guess your answer. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the answer is they have both skied to the North Pole. So let me tell you about them. This is Misbah Khan, and she was a 40-year-old mum in Manchester who'd never even walked in the countryside near her house when she decided to join the Ramblers. And from there, she started walking in the countryside every weekend, then mountains in the UK, and then mountains overseas. Here she is in Iran. And here's a picture from her story in the book. She's climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, the highest mountain in Africa. And when she came back from her mountain climbing exploits, one of her friends showed her an advert. They were looking for one woman from Britain to join a team of 12 women from Europe and the Middle East to ski to the North Pole. And Misbah decided to apply. And out of over 1,000 women, she was picked to be part of the team. And a couple of years ago, just 2 weeks before her 50th birthday, Misbah skied to the North Pole. There she is. Now, here is the other polar adventurer, and this is Anne Daniels. Now, Anne was a 30-year-old mum of young triplets when her husband showed her an advert in the newspaper saying ordinary women wanted to ski to the North Pole. And Anne had never slept in a tent, she'd never skied, but she was looking for a new challenge, and she thought, well, I'm definitely an ordinary woman, and if I can look after these triplets, then I can do anything. So she decided to apply. And out of over 200 women, Anne was picked to be in a team of 20 women skiing in relay to the North Pole. And she loved her North Pole adventure. She absolutely fell in love with the beautiful icy landscapes. And here's a picture from her story in the book, being followed by polar bears. And she loved it so much that when she came back, she wanted to do more polar exploration. So she actually applied and got a job and became Britain's first female North Pole guide. And that is what she does for a living. And she's also in the Guinness Book of World Records for leading the first women's team to ski to the South and the North Poles. Right, one final set of adventurers. Some of the women in the book have had adventures going all the way around the world. So next quiz question, 3 more pictures of women from the book. Which of them has adventured all the way around the world? So let me introduce you to Helen. And then this is Sarah. And this is Jin. Now, which of them has adventured all the way around the world? 5 seconds again. Whoops. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Think of your answer. So the answer is whatever you guessed, you're all correct because they've all had an adventure going around the world. But only one of them has been around the world in 92 minutes. Can you think which one that is? And because of my little trigger happy issue there, I think I've shown you the answer. The one who's been around the world in 92 minutes is Helen Sharman, Britain's first astronaut. Now, Helen was working as a scientist when she heard an advert on the radio saying astronaut wanted, no experience needed. And they were looking for a scientist or an engineer to go to Russia for 18 months to train to be Britain's first astronaut. And she applied with 13,000 other people and she was chosen. So in 1991, she went up to Space Station Mir, where she orbited around the Earth, and it took 92 minutes each time. And there she did science experiments for 8 days before coming back down to planet Earth. The second round the world explorer is Sarah Uten. Now, Sarah spent 4.5 years making a human-powered journey around the globe, and she did this by riding her bike across the land, rowing her boat across the oceans, and kayaking on the water where she couldn't use her rowing boat. And here's a picture from her story in the book when she's kayaking in the Aleutian Islands in Alaska. And here is the last round the world adventurer. This is Jin Jong from South Korea. And Jin Jong, for the last 9 years, has been cycling by herself around the world. And here's a picture of her with a parrot on her head in Australia. And she's not quite finished her journey. She's due to cycle across North Korea and get home to South Korea in the next few months. And here's a picture from her story in the book when she was cycling through Europe at Christmas time, and she decided to make a diversion all the way up to Finland, to Lapland, and there she was looking not for Santa Claus, but for beautiful northern lights in the nighttime sky. Now, I think I've just got time to tell you about one final adventurer, and in many ways she's the most important adventurer that I've mentioned in the book. Now, see if you can think why. So, like many of you watching today, she lives in Scotland. This is Francie, and she's 9. She likes singing, making masks and potions, and science and frisbee. She wants to be a scientist or singer when she grows up. And I'm really in awe of all the adventurous things she does. Let me show you some pictures of her adventures. Cycling, running races, rollerblading, skiing, and adventures on the water. Now, let me explain why she's the most important adventurer I've mentioned in my book. A couple of years ago, I wanted to buy a book for Francie about modern day women adventurers and explorers, but I couldn't find one. So I wrote this book for Francie and all the other boys and girls and grown-ups who want to read about fantastic female adventurers. And I hope you all enjoy the stories in the book as much as she did.
That was so wonderful, Lily. Can you see me and Helen clapping for you? We're doing big claps.
Thanks.
That was so wonderful. And everybody here in the studio in Edinburgh was hanging off your every word. We were really, really enjoying it. Thank you so much for sharing with us the portions from the book and about the adventures. I feel like me and Helen later are going to compare notes on which of us did better at the quizzes, because we can be very competitive. But that was so wonderful. So I hope you all enjoyed Lily's presentation. We're going to go over to Helen soon, but before we do, I want to remind you as well that at the end of the event, we're going to have an audience Q&A. So what that means is that you can send in your questions and we can ask them to Helen and Lily at the end. So do keep that in mind and do send in whatever questions you have. But now, with huge thanks again to Lily for your presentation, we're going to go and have Helen's presentation. Before we do, I'm going to introduce Helen to you. Helen Skelton is best known for presenting Blue Peter and Countryfile. She's taken on incredible challenges, such as completing the Namibia Ultramarathon, and she was the second woman to ever do so, kayaking over 2,010 miles down the Amazon River for sport relief. And remember, Lily talked about that. She broke 2 Guinness World Records doing so. And she's completed a 66-meter high wire walk between the towers of Battersea Power Station. And she talks about all of these things in her book, and it's fascinating. Helen is a beloved face of the BBC, and she's worked on 2 Olympics in London 2012 and Rio 2016, as well as presenting the World, Commonwealth, and European swimming competitions for the channel. Her book, Wild Girl, is full of inspiration and adventures, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more from Helen. Helen.
Thank you, and yeah, thank you, Lily. That was a great talk. If we don't get questions from loads of mums going, how do I join to go to the North? Amazed. Thank you for all of your company this afternoon. So I'm going to start by explaining that picture. That picture there was taken on a training expedition that went so wrong, I had to be rescued by a helicopter. Now, to everybody else, this expedition had gone completely pear-shaped because everything went wrong. We wanted to go out to the South Pole, to Antarctica, for the 100-year anniversary of the first people getting to the South Pole. And in order to do that, I needed to prove that I could cope with the cold weather, because I don't know about you, but I didn't spend my childhood learning how to put up tents in the snow and in blizzards. You know, I didn't know how to make food in minus 10 degrees. So I went out to Iceland to learn to do all of this stuff, and it went so badly wrong. And everybody who was involved in this trip, so my friend Belinda and all of my colleagues who were going to film it for Blue Peter, were traumatized, because they were like, oh, this has gone bad. We had to get rescued. We had to find shelter. There was a helicopter involved. They thought it'd gone awful. To me, I thought it'd gone brilliantly, because I said, if we can cope with anything that Iceland had to throw at us, and everything went wrong, we can cope with anything Antarctica has to throw at us, because we've already been through, surely, what are the worst bits. So in my eyes, that set us up really brilliantly for 42 days at the bottom of the world, which is where this photograph was taken. As I said, we wanted to go out to the South Pole to make a whole television series about 100 years on since the first people discovered the South Pole. Now, obviously at the time, I was working for Blue Peter, and I'm guessing not many people have been to Antarctica, but it's very, very cold. So cold. I mean, if you've ever opened your freezer door, just put your face in front of the freezer for a couple of minutes, and that's how cold it is. It was so cold, my contact lenses froze on my eyeballs and like cracked. My hair was freezing on end. It's so cold in Antarctica, if you had a poo on the ground, it would stay there for 100 years, because there's nothing able to live there to break it down. So that's why if you do go to Antarctica and you do a poo on the floor, you've got to put it in a sandwich bag and take it with you, so that the next people who come along don't see it, because no one needs to see that on a beautiful, beautiful landscape. So when we went out there, I said, this is going to be really boring television if we spend the whole 42 days with me, big hood, big goggles, because you've got to wear goggles, otherwise you can end up with snow blindness because it's so bright. And that happened to somebody that I was with. He moved his goggles and the sunlight was getting in and bouncing off the snow, and he went temporarily blind. So we had to tie a cord around his waist and drag him behind us because he couldn't see anything. His vision came back and he's fine. But that's how extreme that environment is. And for me, it was the biggest lesson ever in, yes, we're hugely important individuals, but we're teeny tiny cogs on this massive, glorious planet, and you have to respect the elements, otherwise they're not mucking about. You know, I moved my balaclava one day, and I had goggles to there and a balaclava there, and I left that tiny little bit of skin, and I had black blisters appear on my face, and it was the moisture in my face froze because of the temperature. And you know, after a few weeks they went, but it was just a really quick and clear reminder that you can't muck about in environments like that. But in order to try and make the television interesting for people that were watching, I don't know, some of you might have seen it on Blue Peter, we decided to take kites, skis and a bike, because nobody had ever cycled to the South Pole, and we thought it'd be good to try and do something different. Turns out people don't cycle at the South Pole for a reason, because it's really, really hard. So we dragged those bikes across the frozen continent. We used them a teeny tiny bit, but it wasn't the best idea I've ever had. It didn't pan out. It wasn't all plain sailing. But for me, that's what adventure is about. You take the bits that go wrong and you make them part of the story. Now, Antarctica wasn't the first big adventure that I was lucky enough to be part of. I'm looking down because I'm getting my clicky thing, because next I'm going to show you a little video which was a snapshot of the adventure I did before I did Antarctica, and it was the thing that gave me the big appetite for expedition. Have a little look.
I have to be honest, my paddling experience is very limited. Training is hard, and you know, it's lonely. You're on your own.
This feels like the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, and I haven't even got there yet.
I'm doing this for sport relief. I met a boy who cares for his mum, who does everything for her. The one break he gets is to go to a youth club. It's a small thing.
Come on, John!
But it makes a massive difference.
Go!
You can make a difference if you get involved.
3, 2, 1, go! Good luck, Helen!
I'm going to kayak the Amazon 6 or 7 days a week for 6 weeks.
2010 miles.
When you start entertaining the idea that this is difficult, you start thinking, actually, it's impossible.
That is amazing.
When everyone's expecting me to do it, how can I let them down? Hello? I just need a bit of go, Helen, 'cause I'm so hot. So tired. Why did I do that? All I want to do is just throw up. There's something really sad about the boats that have sunk. This has been my life. I actually don't want it to end. This proves that you get out of life what you put in. I was so very lucky to be part of that expedition. I went out to South America with my kayak, with my cameraman friend, a doctor. There was a team of 5 of us, and we made a series for Blue Peter. I had said to my boss, I think we really need to show the audience that, you know, big adventures and big impossible challenges are a great idea. And I suggested this to him and he said, that's impossible. And the more I went on about it and the more he thought it was impossible and the more people we spoke to who said, don't do it, this is bonkers, the more he started to come around to the idea that, yeah, do you know what? Wouldn't it be worthwhile showing people that impossible is just a mindset? Like, it's just, if you break it down and do it bit by bit, maybe it is possible. Now, I am not a kayaker. I was lucky enough to grow up in the Lake District, but the first time I went to get in a kayak, I fell backwards out of it. I was being assessed and I'd never really been in one. And I guess I compensated with the confidence and I said, it's fine, I know what I'm doing. And I just tried to get in bum first, then I went backwards into the water, at which point everyone laughed and said, she doesn't know what she's doing, this is pointless, this is clueless, which is exactly what made me want to do it. I'd never kayaked. I wanted to do, the whole of the Amazon. I had to take on all kinds of weird and wonderful landscapes and beasts, and everybody said it was scary and it was difficult and you didn't know what was going to come at you and that's why you shouldn't do it. But that's exactly what made me want to do it. I don't know what life's going to throw at me. I don't know what life's going to throw at you. But for me, if you put yourself in positions that are unpredictable, that are challenging, that are going to, throw you off the track you think that you thought you were on, then that's a good thing. It's a good training for life. And that's exactly what the Amazon was. I divided the distance, 2018 miles, by the number of days I had. And every day I needed to do at least 60 miles. It was exhausting. I was being so sick because the river's so big. It's a bit like a sea in places, it's tidal. So I was getting seasick and I was throwing up all over myself and there was fish jumping in between my legs. And as I said, I wasn't very good in a kayak, so I couldn't really get out of the kayak to have a wee, so I was having to just wee in there. I don't know if you saw in the video, but I had tape all over my hands because I was having to be in the boat for 14, 16 hours most days in order to get the mileage done. So the blisters on my hands were just huge and I had like big welts all over here. So the guys were taping up my hands every day just to try and stop them from getting, unbearably painful. And that's one of the things that people in this world have taught me, that it's little things. I think it was Anna McNuff who said to me, it's little things like blisters that seem tiny and unimportant are the things that are going to bring down big adventures. So the advice that I was always given in those situations, which I encourage you to use, is eat before you get hungry, get warm before you get cold, and get fixed before you get broken. So don't let blisters become a big infectious sore on your foot that's going to stop you from doing something. And that's for me what I was always anxious about. I was anxious something was going to go wrong. I was worried I wasn't going to be able to clock up the 60 miles every day. And I was worried I was going to let everyone down and not make it. And so I didn't enjoy it as much as I should have. And I look back and I think, I should have reveled in the fact that there was pink dolphins all around the kayak, jumping over the front of the boat. I mean, I didn't even know pink dolphins were a thing until I went to the Amazon. They're unbelievable. And we saw sloths every day. We heard howler monkeys every day. We saw parakeets, fish, these huge, big fish, as you saw in the video. We'd sort of hang a hammock or get into the boat at night to sleep, because I was in my kayak, but the team were living on a boat and filming me from the boat. So, sometimes we'd get onto the boat at night and there'd be tarantulas the size of your hand on your pillow. But as I said before, you've got to make all those things part of the story. Otherwise, you may as well stay in your back bedroom. The picture there is because it was getting so hot and sweaty. I mean, it was unbelievable heat. I mentioned before opening the freezer, and that's how cold Antarctica is. The only comparable thing in the Amazon would be to, I'm not suggesting you do it for 1 second, but when you open the oven to put something in, that wall of heat hits you. And we were in that all day, and I was getting so sick from the heat. And I used to put some leaves behind me just to cast a little bit of shadow, because it really was a case of you just make the most of anything you've got around you. It was definitely a challenge that I underestimated. I did not realise how big that river is. It's 5 miles across in some places. And we would go towards these huge, big shipping containers like that were so big. They had 15 Arctic lorries on the back of them. And that's just to give you an idea of how big they are. If you've ever been in the sea and you see like a speedboat create wash, that's what I was riding along the whole time. And as I say, I'm not a kayaker, so it was definitely a baptism of fire. But the only way I managed to get through it was to do each day, rather than think I've got to do 60 miles, I knew I could do 5 miles. So I used to reset my little watch that had the mileage on, reset it and just do 5 miles, and reset it and do 5 miles. And I kept going until I'd clocked 60, but I never thought about doing more than 5 miles. I just kept doing 5 miles until I clocked 60. And each night I'd unroll the next page of the map, because the map showing the distance that I had to go until the end destination was this big. But when I looked at it that big, it just pickled my brain. So every night I folded back the bit that I'd done and forgot about that, and unfolded the bit that I had to do the next day. And for me, that has been a lesson that I've carried with me through a lot of challenges. How do you eat an elephant? Bit by bit. How do you walk across a high wire walk? Rather than think about I'm clicking. Is it moving on? Oh, there we go. That whole idea of breaking everything down step by step has definitely stood me in good stead. What you can see here is me walking on a high wire above Battersea Power Station, which is the huge big towering building in London with the 4 towers. I had done the Amazon, and I had I got a lot of messages from lots and lots of people who were watching Blue Peter saying that they really enjoyed the challenge and being faced with something impossible, and then us getting through it. And so I came up with the idea for the high wire along with my friends, because I thought, what is the most taxing and crazy thing that I could possibly think of doing? And it was this. I am terrible at concentrating. I'm terrible at focusing. I am really hyper, as you can probably tell. So the notion of staying on a wire that is the same width as a 10-pence piece was bonkers. We spent a lot of time trying to persuade buildings to let us hang this wire 110 metres along, 65 metres in the air, and Battersea agreed. I trained for 2 months in the south of France with an unbelievable high wire artist, but very, very, very serious guy. It was the most painful experience of my life, because you think wire, you think it's bendy and it's got flex. It hasn't. And when you fall on it, obviously one leg goes either side of the wire, so it hurts a lot. And I was black and blue for months, and it stressed me out and it freaked me out. But I'd become addicted to this notion that I had to walk on that wire. So I would stand for hours on end on the wire, holding the balance pole, and just focus and just look at the wire. And I wouldn't even walk. Probably for 3 weeks, I just stood on the wire every day, all day. And then I took 2 steps, and then I took 3 steps. And on the day of that walk in London, it was blowing a gale and it was windy. And I went from one end to the other, doing nothing more than 3 steps at a time and just sliding one foot on top of the other and literally just doing 1, 2, 3, deep breath, go again. 1, 2, 3, deep breath, go again. It was the scariest thing I've ever done in my life. I was so scared I couldn't breathe. But I look back on that and I think if you can take on things that are scary, you've got a great reference point. When something else comes up and it's scary, just take a deep breath, 3 steps at a time. All of these sort of mad adventures and ideas came from the first trip that I persuaded my Blue Peter boss to let me do. And I keep mentioning Blue Peter because I think maybe some of you know the programme or you've heard of the programme. But the very first day that I went into that office, I said to my boss, I'm really lucky that I think this show's really lucky you've got an audience of people who want to get excited about the world and want to do something and want to make it their own. And if we've got that, then we need to run with it and create an idea. And I said, maybe I should go and run this 80 miles in the desert in a day. Now, I don't class myself a runner. But at that point, when I said that to him, I had never run more than 10 minutes. And he laughed at me, and various people in the office laughed at me. And they said it was a terrible idea. And I went out to run 10 minutes and I nearly passed out. I was so, my lungs were burning. I thought my lungs were going to fall out of my mouth. It was so stressful. But over the course of 3 months, I built up from 10 minutes to 1 mile, to 5 miles, to 10 miles, to 15 miles, until I was in a position to go to Namibia and attempt to run 80 miles in the desert. The reason that I've shared this picture with you is because, yeah, I was the one running it, but I would never have got to the end without the belief of my friends. And those 3 people had come out to watch me get across the finish line, and they didn't think that I was going to do it. But when they saw me having a go and giving it my all, they were desperately keen to try and help me. And at that point, I'd been so dehydrated and so exhausted that I was hallucinating. And I'm sure you know what hallucinating means, but if you don't, it's when you see things that aren't there. So I thought that there were seals on the floor and I was jumping over them. There were no seals. I was just really pushing my brain, having been in the desert for 24 hours running in 50-degree heat. I ran the first marathon in 9 hours. I ran the second marathon in 7 hours. And I ran the third one in 5 hours, there or thereabouts. I basically finished with 15 minutes to spare and just got in under the line. But the reason that I got in under the line was because halfway through the event, 23 people had set off. By halfway through the event, half of the field had dropped out. By 3/4 of the way through, there was only 8 of us left. And somebody said to me, "You're probably not going to finish, Helen. So just enjoy the view." And now I'm not suggesting that any of you should go forwards and be arrogant or cocky or confident, but I would encourage you to take those little question marks and those little criticisms and just keep them in here and just use it. It isn't about proving anything to anybody else, but it's about proving to yourself what you're capable of. Because I think if you drown out all that background noise, take that little bit of motivation and criticism and put it in here and use it to channel you forward, you just never know how far you might get. I'm not an ultramarathon runner, I'm not a kayaker, I'm not a high wire walker, but I gave it a go and I managed to get to the end and have some pretty special stories to share. I want to say a massive, massive thank you to Lily for sharing the stories that she has in her book, because they're the kind of people that I hope you look up to and inspire you and encourage you to go after whatever it is you think is worth doing, however mad and bonkers or insignificant or huge anyone else says it is. Just keep it in here and see how far you get. Good luck. Happy travels, everyone.
Thanks, Helen. That was so wonderful listening to you talk, Helen, and it just brought your book so back to me and all of your adventures. But also, if you at home read Helen's book, you'll know that it is full of this warmth and this advice that Helen brought in her talk just then. All of these advices on how to deal with challenges, how to cope when you're scared. That really shone through for me. So thank you so much, Helen, for sharing it. I can see we've got a huge queue of audience questions, so I'm very excited to share a couple of questions from everyone watching with Lily and Helen. Are you ready both for our first audience question?
Okay.
So this one is coming through from Sophia B. And Sophia wants to know, what is the most breathtaking natural wonder you've seen on your adventures? And if we start with Lily.
Oh, I think for me, it has to be going to the Himalayas and running around Manaslu, the 8th highest mountain in the world. But it was just the scale of the mountains in the Himalayas, like nothing I've ever experienced. And that was just the most beautiful place that I've ever been. From Hindu villages to Buddhist villages to when we got up high, a snowy, icy pass. It felt like you could touch heaven. It was just so beautiful. So that's the most special place that I've ever gone running.
Gosh, that's beautiful. It felt like you could touch heaven. I love that image. What about you, Helen?
I'm going to say somewhere a bit closer to home. Whenever I went to Alaska, which is an unbelievable landscape. Like Lily said, the scale of somewhere like that is really puts you in your place. But I was there and I was thinking, this is just a bigger version of the Lake District. And maybe that's being a little bit harsh on Alaska, but for me, what I love about the Lake District, I'm going to say I love Blencathra, because if you need to escape and you need to get away, you can just get up there and you can get to the top in, about an hour and a half, and you can see so far. You can see water, you can see fells, you can see heathers, you can see so many different things. And for me, that's just one of those places that it's possibly not the biggest and farthest flung, but for me, it's special because of the memories and just how many different, I like how accessible it is.
Amazing. I love how literally hearing both of you speak, I can picture where you are. And I feel like even though I'm in a studio in Edinburgh, me and all of our tech team here are just like, oh, that sounds amazing. So our next question from our lovely audience at home is from Colette. So Colette wants to know, what was the hardest challenge that you faced and how did you overcome it? And maybe if we'll go to Helen first this time and then to Lily.
I found Antarctica hard because I had to be on my own a lot. And even though I was there with a teammate, a Norwegian guy, he was in his tent, I was in my tent. And I'm the kind of person that gets a lot out of a team. So when I've done things in the past and have gone wrong, I did a big trip in India and I did a driving trip in Turkey, and everything you could imagine went wrong. I drove a camper van across Turkey and got it wedged into the wall of one of a World Heritage site. So I had all kinds of historic people chasing me. Went horrifically wrong. But in all of those situations, I had the team to sort of kind of bounce off and see the positives in it and sort it out. Whereas in Antarctica, I was very much sort of left to my own devices and kind of worried about stuff and thought about stuff. And so I found Antarctica hard because it made me realise how much I value people and how much I value a team. How did I get around it? I just sort of got on with it really and kind of thought I'll never take my friends and my family for granted again because I now realise what I get from them.
It's something that came across in both your books as well about that teamwork and the importance of friendship and the importance of other adventurers that you meet on the way. That really came across in the books. What about for you, Lily? What was the hardest challenge you faced and how did you overcome it?
I think for me, it was probably the hardest because it was the scariest thing that I've done. I did a 4-day running journey, a bit like Anna McNuff in the book. I like doing multi-day runs, and I went across Snowdonia and I hadn't read the guidebook properly. And I ended up on a very scary ridge, high up with a drop down either side. And I was by myself and I'd forgotten to tell anybody where I was that day. And I'm not very good with scary heights. So I was kind of feeling a bit panicky, but the way I overcame it was I watched the film Wild by Cheryl Strayed, and I remember her saying to herself as she was walking, I am not afraid, I am not afraid. And I literally, as I was going along this ridge and then scrambling up the next bit before the path kind of got a bit wider, I was saying to myself, I'm not afraid, I'm not afraid, and a lot of positive self-talk and I was super, super careful till I got to the other side. So that's how I overcame it, through talking to myself and calming myself down, but being super careful.
I find that so inspiring from both of you, though, because I think a lot of us, especially this year, have had moments where we felt a bit afraid. And so hearing from both of you saying, you know what, I've done some scary things in my life, but I got myself through it and I did it, is really inspiring and really lovely to know. So our next question comes from Amma J. So Amma wants to know, and there's sort of two parts to this question. The first one is, what is top of your adventure bucket list? So what do you really want to do? But the second part is there anything that you'd never want to do? So what is at the top of your bucket list? You can't wait to do it. But is there anything that you're like, oh, I'm not up for that? And maybe if we go to you, Helen.
The silly thing is when you work in telly like I do, when you say out loud the things you don't want to do, someone somewhere makes you do them. So I once said at CBBC that I don't like rats. So the next week they buried me in a coffin of rats. Oh. And the guy said to me, look, if you put your hands like that, the rats can't get up there. But the coffin was so big that my hands only went to there. So what I did was funnel all the rats to my face. So I would never want to do anything like that again because I'm not a fan of rats. And what's top of my bucket list, I want to do more climbing. I'm a bit obsessed with Leo Holding and his family. Leo Holding's a brilliant climber and he's just taken his little kids up this huge, big, impressive climb. My kids are obsessed with climbing trees, so climbing is definitely something that I would love to do more of.
Amazing. Thanks, Helen. What about you, Lily?
I think I'd like to make a long cycling journey, maybe. I mean, maybe I was inspired by Gin's story in the book, but I think it would be amazing for me to cycle all the way from where I live in Wales and then into Europe and then get across Europe and through past Russia and into China to where my parents were born. That would be a most fabulous journey. Things that I wouldn't like to do. I do like swimming, but I'm not great with cold water, so I'm probably not going to be kayaking on white water anytime soon. And also, I'm not brilliant with heights, so I also love watching those adventure climbing films as well, but I'd rather watch them than actually take part. So less of the climbing and less of the cold water, I think, for me.
I'm going to be following both of you with interest to see which comes first. I'm going to see if your next adventure is going to be the top of your bucket list or if you surprise me as I follow you both and see you doing some cold water swimming. So our next audience question, and this one is from Doris. I just did a 31-day cycling challenge in July, so I went out on my bike every day. What was the first challenge you did when you were little? So we're thinking about what was the first challenges you did when you were younger, when you were little. I can see both of you going, ooh. Lily, do you want to go first for us?
Oh, do you know what? When I was a kid, I wasn't very sporty and I didn't really like the outdoors. I didn't have much chance to do anything like that because my parents were always busy working in a Chinese takeaway. So I didn't actually get into sport until I was in my early 20s. So I missed out on all those years of having lots of fun adventures in the outdoors. So when I did finally get into doing something outdoorsy, it was taking up running, and it was just literally tying my laces up and running and walking down the street in Birmingham where I was living at the time. And then so my first challenge was probably running and racing a half marathon 6 months after I started running, and then from there I went on to a marathon. So that's how I got into the outdoors, and that led me into the countryside and falling in love with the outdoors.
That's good after 6 months. I think for me, I grew up on a farm, and me and my brother used to build like rafts out of pallets, and we used to get the raft into the river, and then we used to try and get the raft down to the next bridge where my parents would come and pick us up from the next bridge. So the challenge was always to try and build a raft that kept us afloat to the next bridge. And the reason that I laugh so much about that is because now I've got kids and my parents are grandparents. I suspect there'll be some parents and maybe some grandparents watching this. My parents are always telling me off for letting my kids play in the river so much. And I'm like, hang on a minute. You used to put me in the river and send me downstream. Maybe they were just trying to get rid of me, hoping I'd sail off to France or something.
That's amazing. And it actually reminds me, and I'm so conscious that we're coming almost to a close, so this is going to be my last question to you both, with a heavy heart, because I could just listen to both of you talk forever about your adventures, and I'm sure a wonderful audience at home could too. But one of the things is that we know that some of us are staying closer to home just now, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to stop the adventures. Like you said at the start, Helen, even making a sandwich can be an adventure. So I was wondering if you could share just really briefly with us what a couple of ideas might be for adventures that you can do in the everyday moments just now, so that our audience can take away a couple of ideas that they can do in their everyday lives to make adventure possible. Lily, would you like to jump in?
Yeah, I actually asked some of the adventurers in my book what mini adventures they would recommend to the people watching today, because adventures don't need to be big or expensive or a long way from home, and you can do it from your front door. So Tori James, who's climbed Everest, said, just pick a place on a map close to your home that looks interesting, then go and find your way there and see what it actually looks like. Anna McNuff, who's done some really crazy running adventures and all sorts of things, including running through Great Britain last year barefoot. She's got a lovely book out now that I'd recommend if you're looking for lots of suggestions for mini adventures to do. But her suggestions were doing a nighttime hike, biking up the nearest hill or mountain to your house, and also sleeping in a bivy bag, which is a special plastic bag that goes around your sleeping bag so that you can look up at the nighttime sky, so you don't need to be in a tent. So you could do that in the garden or a park. And then finally, Anne Daniels, the North Pole explorer, she equally loves rowing and cycling and running and walking, but she says just camping outdoors in the back garden and cooking outdoors is the best adventure ever.
I agree, that's been my summer, lots of camping in the garden. For me, making tea outside, sleeping in the garden, even making a den in a different room in the house and sleeping somewhere else in the house. So you can do indoor camping as well as outdoor camping. You said loads of good ones there, Lily, so I'm thinking what else I would say. If you live in town, and I've pretended that I've done this on purpose and I haven't, I've taken a backwards bus route through town so that you do your journey back to front. So it feels like you're going on an adventure. My husband's looking at me and rolling his eyes. He's like, that's just because you get lost. I do get lost all the time. But that's part of the adventure. Getting lost is good. You might stumble somewhere that you didn't think that you would stumble. Or another thing that I try and get my kids to do sometimes is don't get the lunch you want to get the lunch that you think your teacher might get. Even just things like that, I want to try and get them to be adventurous with food and try something else and do something a bit different. I think different is the key thing. And we're so lucky. I love holidays. I travel so much. My friends are always saying, you're always on holiday. This year, obviously, I haven't left the country, but we live on an island that's got beaches, mountains, cliffs, lakes. We've got so much stuff on our island that I think this is a brilliant time for everybody to have adventure on our doorstep.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. And I actually feel like that notion of adventure on our doorstep is a lovely way to bring us to a close for today's event and for the digital programme, because we are literally all coming to you wherever you are. Thank you so much to our lovely audience for staying with us, for sending in your amazing questions, and for hopefully thinking of some of the adventures that you're going to have at home. Thank you to Helen Skelton and Lily Dew for sharing their wonderful ideas and adventures with us. And please do check out their books in the Edinburgh Book Festival online bookshop. And a special thank you as well to our sponsor, Baillie Gifford, who've sponsored this programme. All of the Edinburgh Book Festival's online events are free this year, so if you'd like to donate to support, you can, and there should be a wee button for you to do so below your screen. And if you'd like to follow any of my adventures, I've been Nadine Aisha-Jasser, and you can catch the Outriders segment of the Edinburgh Book Festival programme, which is full of exciting adventures too. But before we close, can we just say a massive thank you, and can we clap at home as well, or cheer or wave for Helen Skelton and Lily Dew?
Bye. Bye, thank you for listening. Lovely to meet you, Lily and Nadine.
Lovely
yeah,
to
thank you for having me.
Thank you for being with us, and thank you so much to the audience at home.